Good afternoon, this is Chandra Easton here from Star Astrology Healing, speaking to you about the big changes that are happening in world politics at the moment. I'm going to use esoteric astrology to have a bit of a look and see if we can get some insights from the inside looking out, so to speak. And I'll be using the charts of Putin and other charts. I have spoken about this before back in 2015. You'll find it on my website under, if you just type in the Great Change, under Eastern Europe. Okay, so let's have a look. You can see how big Russia is, and I just wanted to point out to you the border with Europe that goes from the Barents Sea down past Finland and Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and through Belarus and down through Ukraine and to the Black Sea, the Bosphorus. And so of course this is a very strategic boundary, and it's been very, very disputed, and this is the boundary since 1991, after the Minsk Agreement, when the Soviet Union collapsed and the boundaries were redrawn. And of course you may remember that some of the countries up here around the Baltic nations, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, parts of Poland, you know, the borders changed a lot from the Second World War on. Okay, so what I have here is the chart from the 24th of February this year. It was about a week or so ago when Russia invaded. Well, from Ukraine's perspective, Russia invaded their country under no provocation, and from the Russian perspective they would say they were coming in to protect their Russian citizens in the southeastern enclaves. Now let's have a look at the chart and see what it has to say. So the first thing I notice is the T-square. You see the Sun here in Pisces, the Moon in Sagittarius. I better just pause this so I can chat for a while. The Sun here in Pisces, the Moon up here in Sagittarius. We have a T-square going on there, and of course what that means is that the people who suffer are the ordinary people, the common people, and that's because the Moon is receiving the brunt of the T-square, and it will be on again, off again, on again, off again. A disruption and suffering. Yes, and this could be to the Russian people, it could be to the people who live on the boundaries, could be the people in Ukraine, the people in Belarus, but the general populace will suffer. The sign of Pisces, and we have 4 planets in Pisces, governs the continent of Europe. So all of Europe is involved in this brinkmanship because of course we've already had 2 world wars on the continent there, and nobody wants a third. Ask yourself, is it serious? Well, look at Saturn. Saturn's sitting in Aquarius in the first house, so it is a redefinition of the identity of Russia and the identity of the Ukrainian people. But right on the ascendant here, the red line, you'll see the planet Pluto above the red line and the planet Mercury below the red line. So we have a Mercury-Pluto both conjunct the ascendant, which seems to me that the old agreement that was made after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, as far as Russia's concerned, they want to redraw the boundaries. They want to throw that old agreement away and start again. It's a grab for power. Is it overt or covert? Well, I think it's covert. We have 3 planets in the 12th house. So from the Russian perspective, I guess they'd say that it's unfinished business, very karmic matters. And of course they have the might and the manpower, and they've probably been planning it for a long time. Creative leadership for a grab for power. What else can I tell you about this chart? Let's look at the South Node, which is the karmic point. It's in the degree of separation. And the nodes are stationary. Well, from Russia's perspective, Ukraine was separated from the Soviet Union and they want it back. In fact, I think they'd like all of the Baltic states back. I did look up the Sabian symbols. I looked up the Sabian symbol for the 7th degree of Aquarius, and it was a child born out of an eggshell, which is very interesting because we are going through a metamorphosis and a birth. And Mars and Pluto sitting together in the 12th house can be war that's been brewing beneath the surface for a long time. Has been brewing since, the fall of the Russian Empire in 1917. Has it been more than 100 years? Has it been brewing since the Second World War? Has it been brewing since the collapse of the Soviet Union? It's been brewing, and then it erupts. The esoteric degree up here on the South Node is associated with, what was it? I looked it up. It's a military band marching. And of course we've seen it all across our screens that the military are marching and there's a great show of force going on. I suppose the other thing to notice is that we have a nodal barrier. The South Node and the North Node contain all of the planets. So people feel trapped and helpless, and of course, Russia has a very large territory and they want more. The only planet outside the nodal barrier is the Earth, the Dharma point. And so this is a conflict that needs to be resolved through diplomacy, one would hope, and yet we have the drums of war beating over here. So I'm not sure how far diplomacy will get in this particular scenario. Okay, let's continue on. I think let's go on to the next one. Maybe I can move it forward. Okay, I've jumped forward to the next chart that I wanted to talk about, and this is the Minsk Agreement. And this is after the Soviet Union collapsed and there was a meeting of heads of governments, and here we have 4 planets, well 3 planets in Capricorn, Neptune, the Moon, Uranus on the North Node. So an attempt to restructure the boundaries and to contain Russia. Yes, and yet Capricorn is governed by the sign of Saturn, and Saturn's in a very tight square with Venus. So clearly you'd have to ask yourself, was this a workable arrangement? It's all very well to put things on paper. Heads of governments have done this in the past. They get together and they talk about what needs to happen, but they don't always necessarily come to agreements that are workable. And I don't know, with this Venus-Saturn square, we'd have to ask ourselves, has the arrangement that's been in place for 31 years, has it been workable, or has it been literally just a piece of paper that the Russian government have, fudged around the edges? Look at the Jupiter in the chart. Jupiter's in Virgo, square to the Sun, square to Mercury, and square to the Earth. So clearly there's been, I would say, flagrant disrespect for the agreement because of the desire for expansion. The 4 planets in Sagittarius, and expansion to get more territory, to get more land, to reclaim what has been previously Mother Russia. If you look at this chart, you'll notice that Chiron's sitting in the 12th house there, and that's a festering wound. And we'll notice that Leo is the ascending sign. So when Leo's the ascending sign, one likes to be in control of one's destiny. So I don't think Russia would have taken very kindly to other governments redrawing the boundaries. It would have been very, very humbling experience for them, and a loss of pride and a loss of face. And those with Leo rising, this is effectively the birth chart from Russia from 91 on. And Pluto's square. See Pluto down here in the 21st degree of Scorpio, square the Leo ascendant. So they were disempowered, they would have felt emasculated, they would have lost their sovereignty, their leadership, and ever since 1991 they would have been building it back and building it back. We know that this has been a very great wound because Chiron is in Leo in the 12th house. Yes, we'll continue on with that there. Not sure if anything else I could tell you about that. The Dharma point in this Minsk Agreement was in the sign of Gemini. So I don't know whether there have been attempts to sort of talk to Russia, because they've flagrantly broken their boundaries on various occasions, you know, into Croatia, into, let's have a look. What I wanted to show you here is that the Minsk Agreement, if you wrap it around the planet, then we have the boundary of Russia, but Chiron, it's very hard to see in this chart, but there's a line that is the Chiron line, and it goes down through Latvia, through Lithuania, through Belarus, through Ukraine, through Moldova, down through the Black Sea into Turkey, and that's the wound, the Achilles heel. So from Russia's perspective, everything that's yellow represents part of their Achilles heel. This loss of sovereignty, the loss of leadership, the loss of pride, the loss of Mother Russia. And so, of course, what we have, and of course we've had lots of issues around Crimea, you know, and the Chechen Revolution, and we've had issues arising in Georgia, and, you know, it's brinkmanship. This is the way I would look at it, is that Putin won't give up the Queen, won't give up the territory, won't give up the sovereignty, the dominion of Russia, and there's a strategic game plan that's going on. And I think the game plan, well, it's been 3 decades, you know, more than a Saturn return, more than 29 years in the making, and slowly Putin's moving, you know, taking a pawn here, taking a castle there, knocking over a king here, heading for the Queen. You know, this is a strategic game plan, long-term plan. Let's have a look at the chart of Vladimir Putin. Okay, a few things to talk about Putin. Well, the first thing to mention really is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planets in Libra in the 12th house. Now, any individual who had 5 planets in Libra in the 12th house would have very complicated karmic relationships, and those relationships would be difficult, and they would arise quite regularly on the 7-year cycles, because Saturn's involved here. There would be a lot of hidden history. I'm talking about Earth history here, history of the Russian people, probably going back as far as Catherine the Great. There would be a need to purify and redeem some of these matters. The planet Vulcan sitting there in the 12th house. There would be agreements need to be made where one would need to be able to trust Putin, and Putin would have to be able to trust others. But there are a few problems with Putin's chart. We have Scorpio Rising. See here the sign of Scorpio, the 3rd degree of Scorpio Rising, and he's been you know, portrayed in his earlier days as a bit of a sex symbol, as a bit of a, I don't know, a strong man, you know, someone to look up to, someone who would protect people. And yet just beneath the Scorpio ascendant we have Venus in the 12th degree of Scorpio, when one of the degrees associated with fear. And I know, having spent a very small amount of time in Russia, that there's an aura of fear, and people are afraid. And there was no doubt to me as I moved about Russia that I was moving in it through a state-run, you know, I was in a police state. What else can we see in Putin's chart? He has Pluto sitting on the midheaven, and there's the sign of Leo again. Yeah, so this sort of, you know, he feels almost a divine right of kings, one would say. There's a sense of being regal, being the man destined to rule. And I don't have any doubt that he would have had previous incarnations where he's been a ruler, but not necessarily a very kind ruler, because I think the Pluto's been used in very, very, you know, oppressive manners. And I can tell this because of the square and a half down to Chiron. There's no justice, there's no mercy, there's no compassion in this rulership. This is the hammer. And let's not forget that Putin was involved with the KGB, and of course the KGB was the hidden arm of power for communist Russia, and of course that fits very well with the 12th house, the sort of the hidden, and you know, can a leopard change his spots? Can Putin give up the secrecy, give up the power games, give up the lust for control and for bathing in the glory? of leadership. What else can we see in the chart? It has the moon in Gemini in the 8th house. The moon in Gemini in its lower vibration is extremely duplicitous, and he would be very duplicitous with regard to any agreements that is made, and also with regard to the it's the 8th house, so with regard to the money that he is the caretaker for the Russian people. And then of course Jupiter is in a very, very difficult position, and Jupiter in Taurus square the nodes means that some of the greatest karma is this sense of divine right to have the money and the power and the land and the oil wells and the banks, and I know he's, you know, outrageously suppressed anyone who's risen to power and had money or wealth or prestige. You know, he simply poisons people, puts them in jail, people disappear, aeroplanes disappear out of the sky. You know, this is extremely ruthless for money and assets and land. Very, very difficult. Jupiter in his chart, and the Jupiter in his chart governs the 2nd house. So there's a lot of money complexes, a lot of power complexes, very difficult relationships. Destiny point in his chart is in the north nodes in the 19th degree of Aquarius, and 20th degree of Aquarius. And of course we've had Saturn moving through that part of the zodiac recently, and you could say that there's a stewardship or a custodianship that's required for Putin to be able to look after people, and to sort of an opportunity, let's say, for him to clear some of his karma and bring Russia forward into the 21st century. But of course, is that not what we've had? We've had the land grabs into Crimea, we've had the Orange Revolution, we've had the strategic support of Syria, we've had the annexation of the southwestern part of Ukraine, we've had the menacing of the borders. Yeah, so many of Russia's neighbours in the Crimea, around Poland, around the Baltic states, they all wonder who's next. Where will the next shoe drop? You know, will it be Estonia? Will it be Latvia? Will it be Belarus? You know, now Belarus and Ukraine have been kind of the buffer between Europe to the west and Russia to the east. And of course Kazakhstan. And what we have is a lot of wealth here, and we have a lot of wealth associated with resources and minerals and oil. And as we move into the 21st century, you know, these resources are what make the wheels of civilization go round. And so of course Russia in its small boundary has a very small window to get through to the Mediterranean. This is through the Black Sea. And so of course it's easy to understand why this has been a strategic area through the Ukraine, Moldova, Turkey, all of that, you know. And of course we have all the oil wells over here, with very, very rich in minerals and rich in everything that's required for the technocratic society. You know, the rare earth that's dug up, you know. And so you know, there's a lot of jockeying and a lot of positioning, and this is a photograph from some years ago with Putin. You know, I don't know, it's like these are the princes who hold the power. Who holds all the power? Who are the global corporations who are pulling the strings of the chessboard of territories and money and power and banks and resources and rare earth? You know, Putin's clearly one of the players. And of course back in over the last decade, when we had the enormous crisis around Syria, it's easy to understand why Putin had to come in and be very active in the war there, because he wanted to make sure that he had a finger in the pie. You know, he's up to his eyeballs with as America is. I mean, we're not squeaky clean in the West. The NATO countries are not squeaky clean. Britain's not squeaky clean. There's a lot of people that have had their fingers in the pie of the oil and the you know, the resources, the pipelines. And so of course you know, whoever controls the pipelines controls the power. And we've had conflict, therefore, in Kiev. This is 2014 Independence Square, the attempt to destabilise the Ukrainian economy, the Ukrainian, to create civil unrest, to cut bits of Ukraine off and put them in the pocket of Russia. All of this has been going on for the last at least 7 years, and really you would say it's been going on over the last 100 years. This is a war zone for the people who are living there, and they're caught in the middle of a power grab between the East and the West, and the power and the things to be gained are these resources. Let's have a look at Putin's solar return, which started in October last year and goes through until October 2022. So I'll just pause this chart a minute here while I have a bit of a stare at the chart. So basically what we have here is a game plan, a to-do list for Putin from a very personal perspective. What were his goals for the 12 months that runs from October last year until October 2022? So the first thing to notice is that he's restless. Uranus is sitting on the midheaven in Taurus. Now he's restless. Now no doubt this is to do with the last 2 years where everything's been under lockdown because of the pandemic. But meanwhile, the whole world's been moving towards technology and technocracy and the digital world. And I would be deeply suspicious of Putin using digital hacks in order to gain a strategic advantage. I think it's happened before. I believe that he the Russians successfully hacked the Estonian economy and brought down the Estonian economy. And I wouldn't be at all surprised, because you see the planet Uranus that is to do with, it means many things. Putin's restless. The people are restless. There are people marching on the streets. There's been the pandemic, and now we have this time to act once the winter's over. You follow the yellow line from Uranus and it goes down to the Sun and to Mars. So this is volatile, beating the drums of war. Why? For power and for money. In the second house, power and money. Whose power and money? Anyone's he can get his hands on, I would say. To control the technology is to, and to control the resources and to control the pipelines is to control Europe. It's really as simple as that. He has an eye on expansion. His Jupiter associated with expansion in the sign of Aquarius, along with Saturn in Aquarius. The Saturn in Aquarius, remember, has got some connection to the that sort of 30-year cycle since the Minsk Agreement. That I think as far as Putin's concerned, the time's up on that, where he will expand with his Jupiter trine. Because what happens when Jupiter trines Mercury is we're restless and we want to travel, we want to expand, we want to go places. So I don't know whether Putin's moved the banking sector onto the cryptocurrency. I don't know how many of the Russian populace have been moved into the digital currency, but I would suspect that they would be parts of the equation of what's going on. We must talk about physical expansion because of this Jupiter-Mercury trine. Let's see what else there is. Pluto at 24 degrees is in a strong square to the moon. Who will suffer? Well, again, it will be the people. We get the moon impacted. What else can I tell you about this chart? We have Neptune up here on the door to shared money. So it may well be, I know in the last week or so, all the digital currency, all the flow, what do they call it, the SWIFT accounts and the FPOS and the BPays and all the ways that money's transferred in and out of Russia has simply dissolved. I would say that's the Neptune sitting here on the door to shared money. Will he take any of these sanctions lightly? Well, I don't think so. There will be punishment. Yeah, I know there will be punishment because Venus is sitting in his chart in the 29th degree, the degree of cruelty, who will suffer? It will be the people. Yeah. Why will the people suffer? Because he believes he has a divine right to, I think he thinks he's the Messiah for Russia. It's almost like a Messiah complex. I believe he thinks he's the father of Russia, and he has, and it's this year that he will take back his throne, take back his crown, take back his lands, take back his pride. And suffering will inevitably be a part of it. And I think the Russian people will suffer a great deal. It's terrible to see some of the young soldiers who are being sent into battle. Some of them are, isn't it always the way, that young men get used as sort of fodder for war. The Saturn in his chart is it unaspected? Certainly is unaspected. Now what happens when Saturn's unaspected is that the authority is misused, can potentially be misused. It's in the 6th house, so to the day-to-day livelihood of the ordinary Russian people, because even though this is his chart, it's going to impact, the decisions that he makes will impact all of his people. So I don't have much hope that he will handle authority wisely on behalf of his people. I think that one could be certain that if the finances of the ordinary Russians disappear and they can't take money out of the banks, and their value, the currency has been devalued, I'm not certain that it will affect him. If you take that solar return chart, and again I've wrapped it around the planet and I've put it through Ukraine, and this time the line that previously in the Minsk Agreement was the Achilles heel that went through Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus and Ukraine. Now it's the Jupiter line. So what has previously, all the yellow countries that have previously been the Achilles heel that's been a festering wound for the last 31 years, is now in his line of sight for expansion. So thus far we see that he's made the grab for Ukraine. But I look at Belarus, and I look at Lithuania, and I look at Latvia, and I'm not certain that they're safe. Now I think Belarus has been instrumental. I think they were meeting in Belarus, and he certainly launched parts of the war from Belarus. But how long are they a puppet state, or will he overrun them? And then what happens to Lithuania and Latvia? And as I mentioned, those young men in the war, they all look like they're teenagers to me, and I can't see a happy face amongst them. I think Dylan sung about this, the uselessness of war. Okay, let's have a look at the solar return chart. This is the Minsk Agreement. So basically the natal chart for Russia for 2021. And again, I'll just pause that for a second. Okay, so this one, because the Minsk Agreement was in December of 91, so here we are in December last year until December 2022, and the first thing I notice is that there is a nodal bowl. All the planets are caught within the nodal bowl. The only planet outside of the South Node and the North Node is Mars, the planet of war in the degree of separation. So and we have Scorpio Rising. Now, interestingly, this is exactly the same degree that is Putin's. So you could say that this is a year that Putin feels that it's his time to shine and his time to manifest his destiny. Yes, that's the 3rd degree, the 4th degree of Scorpio ascending for Russia for the year. Mars in the degree of separation, so war to try and separate the democratically elected government in Ukraine from the people. And of course Putin would say, well, a lot of the people would want Russia, they consider themselves to be Russian, and so he there are two sides to the equation, and I don't really know the truth of it. All I know is that there's a grab for money and power from Putin's personal perspective, and he's espousing that really he's the saviour of the people. And I genuinely believe that he thinks he is the saviour of the people. Uranus in this solar return chart has a very tight square to the moon, 3-degree square to the moon. The Moon and Saturn in Aquarius and Jupiter in Aquarius, they govern the cryptocurrency, they govern the moves to the digital economy, they govern things like the stock market collapsing or the banks collapsing. Uranus in Taurus has got a great deal to do with the ability to feed oneself, have a roof over one's head, have money, have access to safety and security. It appears to me that the average Russian is going to lose out. Safety, security, money, assets, livelihood, cash, all of those things. Will it be done overtly, or will it be duplicitous? We'll look at the Mercury-Neptune square. Mercury at 21 Sag, Neptune at 20. There'll be lies and lies and more lies. Lies and lies and more lies. And I don't know how much access the Russian people will have to the international media, or whether they will just be getting propaganda. Similarly, I don't know how much propaganda will be pouring out of the West, blaming Putin, making Putin the devil. The way I look at it is that there are grabs for money and power on both sides. I don't begin to understand the complexity of the NATO agreements and what NATO has and what NATO can gain out of pushing into Russia. I've been focusing here upon what Russia can gain by pushing into Europe. But clearly there are lies abounding on all levels. The people will suffer, they will lose economy and money. What else can I tell you about this chart? Will the expansion be successful? Well, I think it will. Here's the trines to the Sun and Mercury in Sagittarius and trines. So it appears to me that that Russia will expand its boundaries. Will they stop at Ukraine? Will they go on into Belarus? Is Belarus really theirs and a puppet government anyway? Will Russia start to threaten the Baltic states? All I can say is that there will be an expansion of the Russian boundaries. This year it's clearly through war that separates people from their elected governments, or separates people from their money. See the 29th degree here, associated with cruelty around money. So we've got major economic collapse in Russia. This is the sanctions. The Russian people will be punished. Anyone who's had money in the banks in Russia will have lost it, if they haven't moved it already, either to the cryptocurrency or out of the Russian, is it the ruble, or even the cash isn't safe because the economy's been devalued. There's so many ways that the cruelty and money. This could be starvation. It could be a failure of crops. I'm not really sure. Will there be more than one wave of expansion? Look at Jupiter, square Mars. I would say that the ruthlessness is to gain power control of the pipelines, because of course Europe's panicking without the Russian gas. How do they get through the winter? So of course the whole discussion around, will Europe move back to a nuclear? Will they use nuclear power? Russia, of course, Putin's threatened that if any of the NATO partners come in and support Ukraine, then they will be on his hit list. They'll be targeted. Would he do it? He couldn't rule it out. I'm more inclined to think that he would hack any country. He would hack the banking and hack the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure of any countries that get in his way. I'm more inclined to think that that's the way he'd go, rather than letting loose nuclear weapons. because the nuclear weapons are to do with Pluto, and they're not. The Pluto's nowhere near as active here as the Uranus square to the Moon. So I think that the attack will be through the currency. I think it will be through the digital. I think he may attempt more than one expansionist move. Yes, okay. Let's have a look and see what we're up to next. Yes, and of course, you know, there's a great amount of pride to be regained and a great amount of ego to be boosted and bolstered. This is what it's all about. You know, it's a grab for power. It's a grab for ego. There's not much that it's not much that's spiritual, is there? Let's have a look at that solar return chart for Russia wrapped around the planet. Here's the Moon-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, straight through Moldova. Now, I don't know enough to know whether Moldova would collapse or whether Russia has designs on Moldova, but I don't like the look of the Moon and Saturn going through it. You can see that that Minsk is either continuing to be a puppet government to launch the I think this is at 100 kilometres from Kiev to Minsk. I think it's not very far. You know, from the Australian perspective, we think nothing. 100 kilometres just a clip down the road. So these are small distances. Yes, let's have a look at Putin's chart. Putin's chart's on the inside here, and the day that the invasion was launched is on the outside. And I really wanted to draw your attention to the fact that Putin's destiny point is 20 degrees Aquarius, and on the 24th of February, Saturn was approaching that destiny. So I guess what I would say there is that Putin feels that his destiny is being fulfilled. Yes. And again, I'll talk again about the money. Here's the North Node. The destiny point from the invasion day sits right on the part of his chart to do with shared money. So he's clearly got partners, and of course we don't know what kind of a partnership China has with Russia. They're really it's really his only ally. What is it they say? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yes, so we don't know what will happen if Russia and China form one bloc against NATO. Yep. Chiron in the invasion chart is 10 degrees Aries. So the crisis is yet to really bite. It's not up to 14 degrees, but when Chiron gets to 14 degrees, then the crisis will really begin to bite. At the moment, what we have is a show of force and the bluster, and the might is right. And of course, I think it's just in the last few days that is it the United Nations or is it NATO have decided that they won't, they're afraid, they don't want to escalate the situation. But we all know that if you don't, if you allow a bully to bully, well then they will continue to bully. We learned this to our great cost in the Second World War. And of course, this image here, now I don't know whether this is a photograph of Chernobyl going up or whether it's part of the battle for Ukraine that was happening 7 years ago. But I've put it in here because I know just in the last day or two, the Russians have surrounded a, not Chernobyl, but another one of the nuclear power stations. So they're using the nuclear power stations as one of the bargaining chips in this war. And where will the borders end up? Where will Russia finish and Europe commence? We don't know at the end of it. We're yet to find out what NATO will do. But certainly he's threatened Sweden, he threatens Finland, people in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. You know, they remember very, very clearly the Second World War. You know, people in the Eastern Bloc countries, they remember the 1990s. So we have a game of brinkmanship, and we don't know what the final solution will be. All we know is that using power and bullying tactics and trying to take money, this is the game. Anyway, that's my take on what's been going on in the last week or so. That's all. Bye for now. Hi, darling.